My wedding dress was a ghost hanging on the back of my door, all ivory lace and silent promises. In 3 days, I was supposed to wear it. In 3 days, I was supposed to walk down an aisle scattered with rose petals and into the arms of Liam, the man I loved more than my own breath. But an hour ago, my mother sat me down, her face a mask of grief, and handed me a folder of documents that burned my fairy tale to the ground. The life I had meticulously planned, the future I had cherished, was a lie. A beautifully constructed, devastatingly convincing lie. So, what do you do when your Prince Charming is revealed to be the dragon? You don't scream. You don't cry. You become the queen. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. The dress felt like a mockery now, a $5,000 shroud for a future that was already dead. I traced the intricate beading on the bodice, each tiny pearl a testament to a dream I no longer recognized. Just 3 days, 72 hours, until I was supposed to become Mrs. Liam Henderson. It's funny, isn't it? How a single conversation can detonate your entire world. My mother's words were still echoing in the suffocating silence of my bedroom, each syllable a piece of shrapnel. He's been stealing from us, Hannah, from the very beginning. It wasn't just a theft of money, it was a theft of trust, of love, of the last 5 years of my life. Every shared laugh, every whispered secret, every tender kiss was now tainted, recast as a calculated move in a long con. Liam, my Liam, the man who held my hand during scary movies and brought me soup when I was sick, was a predator wearing the face of a soulmate. The shock was a physical thing, a cold, heavy weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. My first instinct was to shatter something, to scream until my lungs burned, to call him and unleash a torrent of rage and pain. But as I stared at my reflection in the full-length mirror, seeing the ghost of a bride staring back, a different feeling began to surface, pushing through the grief like a stubborn weed. It was a cold, quiet, and utterly terrifying rage. He had underestimated me. He and his venomous mother, Eleanor, had looked at me and seen a naive, trusting girl, a stepping stone to my family's wealth. They thought I was just another asset to be liquidated. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The wedding wasn't cancelled. Oh no, the show would go on. But the ending was going to be very, very different from the one they had planned. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story. I was going to be the reckoning. I met Liam on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was huddled under the awning of a coffee shop, having forgotten my umbrella, when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and there he was, his smile like a sudden break in the clouds. "Looks like you could use a ride," he'd said, his voice a warm, smooth baritone. It was like a scene from a movie, too perfect to be real. He was devastatingly handsome, with dark hair that fell perfectly across his forehead and eyes the colour of warm whiskey. He worked in finance, he told me, for a big, impressive firm downtown. He was charming, intelligent, and he listened. I really listened when I talked about my passion, my family's boutique hotel, the Willow Creek Inn. I remember thinking it was fate. For 5 years, that's what I believed. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, he was telling me he loved me. Within a year, we were living together. He fit into my life so seamlessly. It was as if a piece of my soul that I never knew was missing had finally clicked into place. He charmed my parents, especially my father. Dad, a man who had built his business from the ground up, saw a younger version of himself in Liam. Ambitious, sharp, and full of ideas. Liam would sit with my father for hours in his study, talking business, market trends, and expansion strategies. He was everything they had ever wanted for me, and more. He was perfect. Too perfect. The proposal happened on our 3rd anniversary, on a trip to Paris he had planned as a surprise. On a balcony overlooking the Eiffel Tower, he got down on one knee with a ring that must have cost a fortune. Of course, I said yes. How could I not? He was my everything. When we got back, the wedding planning began, and so did his deeper integration into my family's business. "I just want to help, darling," he'd say, his tone laced with that practiced sincerity. You all have built something incredible, but your accounting systems are a bit dated. I could modernize them, streamline everything, increase your profit margins by at least 15% in the first year. My father was ecstatic. He saw Liam not just as a future son-in-law, but as the successor he never had. I was set to inherit the inn, but I was the creative one, the one who cared about guest experience and aesthetics. Dad always worried about the financial side. Liam was the answer to his prayers. He was given an office, a title, Chief Financial Strategist, and most importantly, complete access to our books. His mother, Eleanor, a woman who looked like she was carved from ice, was his biggest cheerleader. She would visit the inn, her eyes sweeping over everything with a critical gaze, and say things like, "Liam has such a brilliant mind for this sort of thing. You're so lucky to have him. This place has potential, but it needs a firm hand." It was condescending, but I told myself it was just her way. She was proud of her son. I should be too. The red flags were there, of course. They always are, aren't they? You just don't see them when you're blinded by love. They were small at first, little comments and gestures that pricked at the edge of my consciousness. Whenever I'd try to ask about the new accounting software he'd implemented, he'd give me a patronizing little smile. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, sweetheart. It's all boring numbers and spreadsheets. You just focus on making everything beautiful." I was the creative one after all. That was my box. He was the smart one. That was his. He started buying me lavish gifts, a Cartier watch, a Chanel bag, a weekend trip to Napa. I was dazzled, but a small, nagging voice in the back of my mind wondered how he could afford it all. His salary was good, but was it that good? When I asked, he'd just laugh. "I've been making some very smart investments, darling. For us." I now know what those investments were. He was investing my family's money into his own pockets. The enablers were all around me. My father, so desperate for a son and a successor, handed him the keys to the kingdom without a second thought. Our family friends would coo about what a perfect couple we were, how lucky I was to have found a man who was so handsome and so brilliant. No one questioned it. No one looked beneath the polished surface. To do so would have been to admit that the fairy tale wasn't real. And who wants to do that? My mother was the one who broke the spell. She had always been his biggest fan, second only to my father. She loved the way he doted on me, the way his eyes would light up when I entered a room. But my mother is also a deeply practical woman. She was a bookkeeper before she and my dad started the inn, and she has a mind for numbers that is sharper than anyone gives her credit for. She started noticing small things. An invoice from a vendor she'd never heard of. A transfer to an account that wasn't on their usual list. She asked Liam about it, and he gave her the same condescending smile he always gave me. "Just some restructuring, Evelyn. Maximizing our tax efficiency." That was his mistake. He underestimated her too. While Liam and I were at a cake tasting, debating the merits of lemon chiffon versus red velvet, my mother went into the office. She spent 6 hours digging through the new, streamlined system. She followed the breadcrumbs. The unfamiliar vendor was a shell corporation. The new account was based in the Cayman Islands. She uncovered a systematic, 2-year-long campaign of embezzlement, a slow and steady bleeding of the company's assets that totaled nearly $2 million. She printed everything: the bank statements, the transfer logs, the incorporation documents for the shell company, which listed Liam's mother, Eleanor, as the sole director. Then, she waited for me to get home. She sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I did my homework as a child, and she laid out the evidence of my life's greatest betrayal. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered, her own eyes filled with tears, and my world fell away. The first 24 hours were a blur of shock and a grief so profound it felt like a physical wound. I locked myself in my room, the folder of evidence lying on my bed like a venomous snake. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 5 years, searching for the truth. Every memory was now a lie. The trip to Paris wasn't about love. It was a celebration of his successful fraud. The expensive gifts weren't tokens of affection. They were my own money, thrown back in my face. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from him. Missing you, my beautiful bride. Can't wait to see you tonight. Counting down the seconds until you're my wife. Each message was a fresh wave of nausea. I wanted to die. And then I wanted him to. On the second day, I called Clara. She was my best friend, my maid of honor, my emotional anchor. She was at my house in 20 minutes, a bottle of tequila in one hand and a pint of ice cream in the other. I laid it all out for her, my voice breaking as I explained the depth of the deception. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. She just listened, her expression hardening with every detail. When I was done, she took a long sip of tequila, slammed the glass on the table, and said, "Okay, so we're going to destroy him." And just like that, the grief began to recede, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. She was right. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. He thought he was marrying a naive little girl. He was about to meet the woman she had become because of him. The plan began to form, not in a rush of angry tears, but in a quiet, calculated whisper between two friends. The wedding was the perfect trap. It was the ultimate symbol of the life he was trying to steal, and it would be the stage for his downfall. The hardest part was pretending. I had to go back into the world and act as if my heart wasn't a pile of ashes. I had to answer Liam's calls and listen to him talk about our future, his voice dripping with the false sincerity that I now saw for what it was, a performance. It took every ounce of my self-control not to scream the truth into the phone. Instead, I became an actress. I was playing the role of a lifetime, the blissful, unsuspecting bride. "I'm sorry I was distant, baby," I'd coo. "Just pre-wedding jitters. You know how I am." He bought it, of course. Why wouldn't he? In his mind, I was simple, emotional, and completely under his spell. His arrogance was my greatest weapon. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. I went to my final dress fitting, smiling for the seamstress as she made the last adjustments. I finalized the seating chart with Eleanor, enduring her smug pronouncements about which guests were important and which were not. I smiled as she placed herself and Liam at the head of the family, literally and figuratively. She talked about the dynasty we were building, and I had to physically bite my tongue to keep from laughing in her face. My inner monologue was a raging fire, but my exterior was a placid lake. It was exhausting, living this double life, but it was also empowering. I was no longer a passive victim of his scheme. I was an active participant in his demise. Every fake smile, every feigned term of endearment, was another nail in his coffin. He thought he was in control. He had no idea that the game had changed, and I was the one making the rules now. While I was playing the part of the happy bride-to-be, my mother and I were assembling our arsenal. The folder of evidence was a good start, but it wasn't enough. We needed something irrefutable, something that would leave no room for doubt or denial. We hired a forensic accountant, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Davies, who took one look at my mother's findings and gave a grim, satisfied nod. "Theatrical, but sloppy," she'd said of Liam's scheme. "Men like this, they get high on their own cleverness. They always leave a trail." While Ms. Davies dug deeper into the digital labyrinth of Liam's fraud, I focused on the physical world. I knew his habits, his routines, his secrets. I knew about the antique desk in his home office that he always kept locked. He told me it held boring work stuff, but he was obsessively protective of it. While he was out for a round of golf with my father, a golf game I had encouraged, I went to work. It took me less than 10 minutes with a bobby pin and a YouTube tutorial to pick the lock. Inside, I didn't find boring work stuff. I found a second laptop and a burner phone. The laptop was a goldmine. It contained the real spreadsheets, the ones that showed the money flowing from our business accounts, through the Shell Corporation, and into a personal offshore account in his name. There were emails between him and his mother, discussing their strategy, their timeline, and their contempt for my family. "She'll never suspect a thing," he wrote in one. "She's too in love to see straight." In another, Eleanor advised him on how to best manipulate my father. It was all there, in black and white, a blueprint of their betrayal. I photographed everything, my hands shaking not with fear, but with a vindicated fury. This was the smoking gun, and I knew exactly when and where I was going to fire it. The next step was the most painful. I had to tell my father. He was the biggest enabler, the one whose blind trust had made all of this possible. He adored Liam. Breaking that trust would be like breaking his heart, and mine along with it. My mother and I sat him down in his study, the same room where he and Liam had spent so many hours planning the future of our family. I watched as my father's face went from loving pride, assuming we were there to discuss some last-minute wedding detail, to confusion, and then to a deep, horrified denial as I laid out the evidence. He shook his head, refusing to believe it. "No," he kept saying. "There's a mistake. Liam wouldn't do this. He's a good boy. He loves you." It was only when I showed him the photographs from the second laptop, the emails between Liam and Eleanor, that the denial finally shattered. I saw the moment it happened. The colour drained from his face, and he seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. The proud, strong patriarch I had known my whole life crumpled before my eyes. His anger at Liam was eclipsed by his own shame and guilt. "I did this," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I let him in. I gave him everything." It was a brutal, heartbreaking conversation, but it was necessary. We couldn't move forward without him. By the end of the night, the three of us were united. The plan was no longer just mine and my mother's. It was a family mission. We would not let them destroy what we had built. We would fight back, together. With my father on board, the plan escalated. We had less than 72 hours until the wedding. The clock was ticking. Ms. Davies, the forensic accountant, worked around the clock, compiling her findings into a neat, damning report. My father, now fueled by a righteous fury, contacted our lawyer and a trusted detective from the local police department, a man he'd known for 20 years. We had to move carefully. We didn't want to tip Liam off. The detective agreed to have 2 plainclothes officers attend the wedding as guests. They would be there to ensure things didn't get out of hand and to escort Liam and Eleanor away when the time came. The next phase of the plan was meticulous. We spent an entire day in a copy shop, printing. We made 150 copies of a summary of Ms. Davies' report, complete with the most incriminating emails and bank statements. Each packet was placed in a crisp, ivory envelope, identical to the wedding programs. My best friend, Clara, was put in charge of distribution. She and a few trusted cousins would hand them out to the guests, not as they arrived, but at the precise moment I gave the signal. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. We were a team of conspirators, moving with a quiet, shared purpose. My conversations with Liam became a surreal exercise in self-control. He was in high spirits, talking about our honeymoon in the Maldives, a trip that I now knew was being funded by the final, large transfer he had made from our accounts just last week. He was smug, condescending, and utterly oblivious. He was a fly, walking confidently into the most elaborate spiderweb he could possibly imagine. And I was the spider, waiting patiently in the center. The day before the wedding was the rehearsal, followed by the rehearsal dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. It was the final dress rehearsal for my performance, and the biggest test of my nerve. Walking into that restaurant, holding Liam's hand, felt like walking into the lion's den. Eleanor was in her element, presiding over the event like a queen holding court. She had invited all of their important friends, a collection of wealthy, arrogant people who looked at my family with a thinly veiled condescension. I could feel their eyes on me, sizing me up, the quaint little hotelier's daughter who had snagged the brilliant Liam Henderson. Little did they know. I sat through the dinner, picking at my salmon, a serene smile plastered on my face. I listened to the toasts, each one more glowing than the last. They talked about Liam's genius, his ambition, his bright future. They talked about us as a power couple, ready to take the world by storm. It was nauseating. Then, it was Eleanor's turn to speak. She stood up, champagne flute in hand, and delivered a speech that was a masterpiece of passive aggression and self-congratulation. "We are just so thrilled to welcome Hannah into our family," she said, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness. "And we are so proud of Liam for the incredible work he has done to help her family's business. He has a vision, a Midas touch. He is truly strengthening their foundation for the future." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. She raised her glass. "To Hannah and Liam. And to the very, very prosperous future they are building together." After Eleanor's speech, all eyes turned to me. It was my turn. Liam squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Go on, darling. Say something lovely." I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it, a preview of what was to come. I picked up my own champagne flute, my hand surprisingly steady. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every single person. I looked at my parents, who gave me a subtle, encouraging nod. I looked at Clara, who gave me a tiny, fierce wink. And then I looked at Liam and Eleanor, who were beaming at me, so full of pride and arrogance. "Thank you, Eleanor," I began, my voice clear and calm. "And thank you all for being here. This has been an incredibly educational journey." I paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Liam has taught me so much. He's taught me about business, about trust, and about the importance of looking beneath the surface to see what's really there." I turned my gaze directly to him. He has a vision, it's true, and it's a vision that has changed my life, and my family's life, forever. I raised my glass. "So I would like to propose a toast to getting everything that you deserve in this life, every single thing, to Liam." The room erupted in applause. Liam, completely oblivious to the double meaning, leaned in and kissed me, whispering, "That was perfect, my love." I just smiled. It was a promise. The morning of my wedding day, I woke up not with butterflies, but with ice in my veins. Today was not about love and commitment. It was about justice and retribution. I went through the motions of a bride preparing for her big day, but it was all a carefully constructed facade. The hairstylist, the makeup artist, they all cooed about how calm I was. "You're the most relaxed bride I've ever seen," the makeup artist chirped. I just smiled and said, "I've never been more sure about what I'm about to do." While they worked on my hair and makeup, I was on my phone, coordinating with Clara and my father in a group chat we had labelled Project Nightingale. The evidence packets were in place. The plainclothes officers had arrived and were mingling with the guests. The lawyer was on standby. Everything was set. Putting on the dress was the final step in my transformation. It no longer felt like a ghost or a shroud. It felt like armor. The ivory lace was my chainmail, the veil my helmet. As I looked at my reflection, I didn't see a heartbroken girl. I saw a warrior. My mother came into the room, her own eyes filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She adjusted my veil, her hands gentle. "Are you ready for this, Hannah?" she asked softly. I met her gaze in the mirror, my own eyes clear and steady. "I was born ready," I replied, and I meant it. The walk to the ceremony was the longest of my life. The gardens of the inn were decorated beautifully, a perfect picture of a fairy tale wedding. Hundreds of guests, friends and family from both sides, were seated in pristine white chairs. The string quartet was playing something soft and romantic. It was all so perfect, so beautiful and so fake. My father stood waiting for me at the beginning of the aisle. He took my arm, his grip firm and reassuring. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, you remember that." I squeezed his hand. "We're doing this together." As we started to walk, every head turned towards me. I saw the faces of our friends, our employees, our family. And then I saw Liam, standing at the altar, looking impossibly handsome in his tuxedo. He was beaming, his eyes full of a triumphant love that I now knew was pure fiction. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery, and in a way, he thought he had. As I reached the altar, he took my hand, his touch now feeling reptilian and cold. He leaned in to whisper in my ear, "You look breathtaking. I'm the luckiest man in the world." I just gave him a small, tight smile. "You have no idea. I whispered back. The officiant, a kindly man who had known my family for years, began the ceremony. He spoke of love, of commitment, of the sacred bond of marriage. I stood there, my hand in Liam's, and felt nothing but a cold, waiting calm. The world seemed to slow down, the officiant's words fading into a dull hum. My entire focus was on the moments to come. I was aware of everything. The scent of the roses, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the slight rustle of the guests in their seats. I saw Clara, standing in her place as my maid of honour, give a tiny nod to her cousins, who were stationed at the end of each row of chairs. The signal. The envelopes were about to be in play. The officiant reached the pivotal moment in the ceremony. He smiled at the assembled crowd. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace. A traditional line, usually met with a respectful silence, but not today. A beat of silence passed. Liam squeezed my hand, a confident, possessive gesture. And then, I took a step forward, gently removing my hand from his. I turned to the officiant, my voice ringing out in the sudden, absolute quiet. "Actually," I said, my voice perfectly clear, perfectly steady, "I do." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. 150 heads swiveled in my direction, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and disbelief. Liam's smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. "Hannah," he said, his voice a confused whisper. "What are you doing?" I ignored him. Clara stepped forward and handed me a small, discreet microphone that had been hidden in my bouquet. I turned to face our guests, my heart pounding not with fear, but with adrenaline. "I apologize to all of you," I began, my voice amplified now, reaching every corner of the garden. "I know this is not what you came here for today. You came for a wedding. But unfortunately, a wedding requires two people who love and respect each other, and that is not what we have here." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I could see Liam's face, the confusion curdling into panic. Eleanor had risen slightly from her front row seat, her face a mask of outrage. "What is the meaning of this, Hannah?" she hissed. I met her icy gaze. "The meaning, Eleanor, is that the party is over." At that moment, as if on cue, Clara's cousins began to move down the aisles, handing the ivory envelopes to each guest. "In your hands," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "you will find the real wedding program. It's a story, a love story, of a different kind. It's the story of a man who didn't fall in love with a woman, but with her family's bank account." The garden was filled with the sound of rustling paper as 150 envelopes were opened. I watched as the guests' faces shifted from confusion to dawning horror. I saw them reading the summary of the forensic accountant's report. I saw their eyes scanning the copies of the emails between Liam and his mother. I saw the moment the truth landed, the moment the polished facade of the perfect couple shattered into a million pieces. Liam was white as a sheet, his eyes darting from me to the guests, to his mother. He looked like a cornered animal. "Hannah, this is insane," he stammered, taking a step towards me. "You're hysterical. This is a joke, right?" "Does this look like a joke, Liam?" I asked, my voice cold as steel. I gestured to my father, who now stood up and walked to my side. My father would like to say a few words. My dad took the microphone, his voice shaking with a fury I had never heard from him before. "This man," he said, pointing a trembling finger at Liam, "is a thief and a con artist. He abused my trust and the love of my daughter. He has systematically stolen nearly $2 million from my family, from the business I spent my life building." The crowd erupted in a low murmur of shock and outrage. Liam's important friends were looking at him now, not with admiration, but with disgust. His house of cards was collapsing, all at once. "She's lying!" Liam finally screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "They're all lying. This is a setup." Eleanor was on her feet now, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you? My son is a good man. You're just a spoiled little girl throwing a tantrum." But their protests were drowned out by the evidence in 150 pairs of hands. The game was over. They had lost. As if on cue, the two plainclothes officers, who had been standing quietly at the back, began to walk down the aisle. Their movements were calm, professional, and utterly final. They flanked Liam and Eleanor, their badges now visible. "Mr. Henderson, Miss Henderson," one of them said, his voice calm but firm. "We need you to come with us." The desperation on their faces was a sight I will never forget. The smugness, the arrogance, the condescension, it all melted away, replaced by raw, pathetic fear. This was the schadenfreude, the dark, satisfying humour of justice served. They had thought they were untouchable. They had believed they were smarter than everyone else. And now, in front of everyone they had tried to impress, they were being exposed as nothing more than common criminals. As the officers escorted them away, Liam looked back at me one last time, his eyes pleading. "Hannah, please," he begged. I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. I didn't say a word. I just watched him go. The moment they were gone, a strange silence fell over the garden, broken only by the whispers of the stunned guests. The fairy tale setting was now the scene of a crime. The beautiful wedding had become a public execution. I stood there for a moment, the microphone still in my hand, and took a deep breath. I felt calm. The rage had subsided. The pain was still there, but it was a distant echo. In its place was a profound sense of relief, of release. I had taken back my story. I had refused to be a victim. I turned to our guests. "Again, I apologize for the change in plans," I said, a small, wry smile touching my lips for the first time. "But please, stay. The food is paid for. The bar is open. Let's call this a celebration of new beginnings." And then I did the most symbolic thing I could think of. I turned, walked to the edge of the manicured lawn, and with a single decisive motion, I unzipped the beautiful, expensive dress and let it fall to the ground in a heap of ivory lace. Underneath, I was wearing a simple, comfortable sundress. I kicked off the painful heels, left the armour where it lay, and walked away, barefoot, into the arms of my parents and my best friend. We didn't stay for the party. We went back to the house, the four of us, and we sat around the kitchen table, the same one where my world had fallen apart just days before, and for the first time in a long time, we just talked. We healed. It's been 6 months since my non-wedding day. The legal battle was messy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Liam and Eleanor both took plea deals to avoid a more public trial, and they are now facing the consequences of their actions. We won't get all the money back, but we'll get enough. And more importantly, we got our lives back. Rebuilding the business has been hard work, but it's been a labour of love. My father and I are partners now, in the truest sense of the word. He trusts my creative vision, and I have discovered a surprising aptitude for the financial side of things. I'm no longer just the pretty little head in the corner. I am a businesswoman. I am a survivor. I am a queen who saved her own kingdom. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone enough to fall in love again, not in that all-consuming fairy tale way. That part of me, the naive, trusting girl, is gone forever. But I'm okay with that. The woman who has taken her place is stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I ever thought possible. Sometimes, the worst betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations. You have to walk through the fire, but you come out the other side forged into something new, something unbreakable. They thought they could destroy me, but they only succeeded in showing me what I was truly made of. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I will always be grateful.